The Staircase in the Woods. My name is David. I spent the better part of the 1990s working for the National Park Service as a search and rescue SAR officer in the Pacific Northwest. People think my job was like the movies, heroic rescues, helicopters, and tracking footprints in the mud. And for the most part, it was. But there's a reason why old-timers in the SAR community don't talk about certain things. There's a reason why. After 10 years of service, I handed in my badge and moved to a city where the only trees are planted in concrete boxes. I was stationed in a remote sector of the Olympic National Park. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, but it's also a place of impossible density. The ferns grow as tall as a man, and the moss blankets everything in a heavy, suffocating green. You can be 10 feet off the trail and be completely invisible to the world. In 1994, we were looking for a 5-year-old boy named Toby. He had vanished while his parents were setting up camp near the Hoh River. No tracks, no scent for the dogs, nothing. We had been sweeping the area for 3 days. I was assigned to a high-altitude sector, about 15 miles away from the last known sighting, an area so rugged that no 5-year-old could have reached it on foot. I was pushing through a dense thicket of old-growth cedar when I broke into a clearing that wasn't on any of our topographical maps. The clearing was a perfect circle, about 30 feet across. The grass inside was vibrant, unnaturally short, as if it were being meticulously mown every day. But that wasn't what made me stop in my tracks. In the exact center of the clearing stood a staircase. It wasn't attached to a house. It didn't lead to a porch or a second floor. It was just a freestanding set of stairs made of pristine white marble. It looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel in Seattle, not in the middle of a primary forest 15 miles from the nearest road. There were 12 steps, carved with intricate floral patterns along the sides, and a polished mahogany banister that caught the filtered sunlight with a dull, oily glow. "Dispatch, this is Ranger 4 Charlie," I whispered into my radio, my eyes never leaving the marble. "Go ahead, 4 Charlie," the voice crackled back. "I've found a structural anomaly. High altitude sector 7B. It's a staircase, freestanding, looks brand new." There was a long pause on the other end. Longer than usual. When the voice came back, it was no longer the dispatcher. It was my supervisor, Chief Miller. His voice was low, devoid of its usual gruffness. "4 Charlie, listen to me carefully. Do not approach the structure, do not photograph it, and for the love of God, do not step on it." "Chief, it's just a set of stairs. Maybe some eccentric hiker." "It is not a set of stairs, David," Miller interrupted, his voice trembling. "Mark the coordinates in your head, turn around, and continue the search for the boy. If you see it again, you move in the opposite direction. Do you understand?" I looked back at the staircase. I was a man of logic, of structures, of things that could be measured. And yet, looking at that marble, I felt a deep, primal sense of wrongness. The shadows around the base of the stairs didn't match the angle of the sun. They were too long, too dark, and they seemed to be pulsing ever so slightly, like a slow, heavy breath. I started to turn away, just as the chief had ordered. But then I heard it. From the top of the stairs, the 12th step that led to nothing but empty air, I heard the sound of a child giggling. "Toby?" I called out, my heart leaping into my throat. The giggling came again, followed by the soft tap, tap, tap of small feet on marble. I shined my light toward the top of the structure. There was no one there. But on the third step from the top, a small red plastic fire truck, Toby's favorite toy, according to the briefing, was sitting perfectly still, its wheels spinning slowly as if it had just been placed there. I stood at the edge of that perfect circle of grass, my boots heavy with the mud of the Ho River, but my mind was spinning faster than the wheels on that little red fire truck. Toby's toy. It was right there. Logically, if the toy was on the third step, Toby had to be nearby. But logic doesn't survive long in the deep woods of the Olympics. Chief, I've got a visual on the subject's toy, I said into the radio, my voice strained. It's on the structure. I'm going in to retrieve it. There might be a trail. For Charlie, stay where you are. That is a direct order. Miller's voice was almost a scream now, distorted by the interference of the trees. The toy isn't real, David. It's bait. Get out of there. The radio cut into a sharp, high-pitched whine and then went dead. Not just static, but a complete silence, as if the battery had been sucked dry in an instant. I looked back at the stairs. The giggling had stopped. Now, there was only the whisper of the wind through the cedar branches, but even that sounded different here. In this clearing, the wind didn't move the grass. The air was dead, cold, and smelled faintly of ozone and old, dry paper. I took my first step into the circle. The moment my boot touched that unnaturally short grass, the forest behind me seemed to recede. The tall ferns and the thick moss didn't disappear, but they became blurred, like a photograph out of focus. The only thing that remained sharp, painfully clear, was the white marble of the staircase. I approached the base of the steps. Up close, the marble wasn't just white, it was translucent. I could see faint swirling patterns deep inside the stone, moving like slow-motion galaxies. And the smell changed again. It wasn't ozone anymore. It was the scent of a hospital, sterile, sharp, and smelling of floor wax. Toby, it's Ranger David. I have your truck. Come out, buddy. We're going home. I reached out my hand to grab the fire truck from the third step, but as my fingers crossed the invisible line where the staircase began, the air began to vibrate. It was a low-frequency hum that I felt in my teeth, in my marrow. I didn't step on the first stair. Not yet. I just reached for the toy. But the toy moved. As my fingers were inches away, the little red truck slid up to the fourth step, then the fifth. It didn't roll. It was as if the marble itself was shifting, carrying the object upward toward the empty space at the top. Stop, I whispered. I looked up at the top of the stairs. The 12th step led to nothing. Just a patch of gray sky visible through the canopy. But as I watched, the air above the top step began to shimmer, like heat rising off a highway in July. For a split second, I didn't see the sky. I saw a room. A clean, white room with a single window looking out over a city I didn't recognize, a city with spires that were too tall and lights that were too bright. And in that room, I saw the back of a small boy's head. Toby, I forgot Miller's warning. I forgot the rules of the SAR. I forgot everything except the need to reach that child. I placed my right boot on the first step. The marble felt like ice. But more than that, it felt hungry. The moment my weight hit the stone, I felt a sudden, violent tug in my chest, as if my very soul was being yanked toward the top. The hum in the air turned into a roar, a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, thousands of them, whispering names, dates, and coordinates. I took the second step. The world around me vanished. The forest was gone. The clearing was gone. I was standing on a white staircase in a void of pure, blinding light. There was no up and no down. There was only the vertical line of the marble and the overwhelming urge to reach the top. I took the third step. The air grew thin. My lungs burned as if I were standing on the summit of Everest. I reached for the banister, but the mahogany felt like human skin, warm, yielding, and pulsing with a slow, heavy heartbeat. I looked down at my hands and saw that they were becoming pale, almost as translucent as the marble itself. Don't. Stop. David. The voice didn't come from the top. It came from the step I was standing on. The boy is almost home. You just need to finish the climb. It was my own voice, but it sounded like it was coming from a version of me that had already reached the top years ago. My fourth step felt like wading through liquid lead. Every inch I climbed, the gravity of the world I knew, the world of trees, of rain, and of SAR protocols seemed to peel away from me. I wasn't just climbing stairs, I was climbing out of reality. I looked down, expecting to see the forest floor or the clearing. Instead, there was only a swirling gray mist that looked like static on an old television screen. The clearing had been a portal, and the staircase was the bridge. I could feel the individual cells in my body vibrating, trying to pull apart, trying to align themselves with the cold, perfect geometry of the marble. "Toby!" I shouted again. My voice didn't sound like a man's anymore. It sounded like a chime, a metallic resonance that echoed through the white void. The boy, or the thing that looked like Toby, finally turned around. He was standing on the 10th step. He was holding the red fire truck, but his fingers were fused to the plastic. His face, it wasn't a child's face anymore. It was smooth, like the marble beneath his feet. He had no eyes, no nose, only a faint horizontal line where a mouth should be. "David, look at the view," the boy said. The words didn't come from his mouth. They vibrated directly into my skull. I looked past him, toward the 12th step. The shimmering window I had seen earlier was wider now. It wasn't just a room. It was a doorway into a place that felt like a nightmare designed by an architect from another dimension. I saw white towers that reached into a violet sky, and thousands of these staircases, all floating in the air, each with a single, pale figure standing on the top step, staring out into the nothingness. I took the 5th step, then the 6th. With every step, I felt my memories being compressed. I forgot the name of the town I grew up in. I forgot the smell of cedar after a rainstorm. I forgot the weight of my badge. I was becoming light. I was becoming part of the structure. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong in this white void. It was the sound of a radio. Not a clear voice, but a burst of static and the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of an emergency locator transmitter. 4, Charlie, come in. David, do not reach the 10th. Chief Miller's voice was faint, coming from somewhere far below, beneath the gray mist. It was a tether, a jagged, ugly, human sound that cut through the perfect, humming silence of the stairs. I looked at my hand on the mahogany banister. It was no longer pale. It was starting to turn gray, the skin taking on the texture of polished wood. I looked at the boy on the 10th step. He was reaching out his hand toward me, beckoning me to join him in the violet sky. Just 3 more. David. Then the wait stops. Then the wait. Silence begins. I felt a sudden, violent surge of anger. Not fear, but a raw, human rage at the coldness of this thing. This wasn't a rescue. This was a harvest. The forest wasn't hungry, it was a filter, and the staircases were the collection points for the things that fell through the cracks. I reached for my belt. My gear was mostly gone, dissolved into the white light, but my heavy, iron-bound SAR radio was still there, hanging by a leather strap. It was the only real thing I had left. It was heavy, it was battered, and it was filled with the voices of men who spent their lives fighting the dark. I didn't take another step up. Instead, I raised the radio and slammed it down onto the marble of the 7th step. Crack. The sound was like a thunderclap in a library. A jagged black fissure erupted from the point of impact, tearing across the pristine white stone. The hum in the air turned into a shriek of feedback. The white void flickered, and for a second, I saw the green needles of the cedar trees through the mist. No! The boy screamed, his voice turning into a mechanical grind. The circle must be closed. The staircase began to shake. The marble beneath my feet started to liquefy, turning into a cold, white slush. I felt myself slipping, my boots losing their grip on the 7th step. I looked up at Toby, the thing that was Toby, and I saw the window at the top step beginning to shrink. I realized then that the stairs didn't just lead to another place. They fed on the climb. Every step I took gave the structure the energy to manifest in our world. If I reached the top, the bridge would be permanent. If I stayed, the clearing would never close. I reached out and grabbed the red fire truck from the boy's hand. The plastic felt hot, searing my palm. As I pulled it away, the boy's face shattered like glass. I didn't climb down, I jumped. I threw myself off the side of the 7th step into the gray mist, clutching the red fire truck to my chest. Falling from the 7th step didn't feel like falling through air. It felt like falling through time, a sickening, visceral deceleration that pulled at my skin and made my vision blur into streaks of green and gray. I expected to hit the ground with bone-shattering force, but instead, I hit the soft, mossy earth of the Ho River Basin with a dull, wet thud. The transition was violent. 1 second, I was in a void of blinding white light. The next, I was back in the suffocating, humid green of the Olympic National Park. The silence of the stairs was replaced by the deafening roar of the forest, the wind in the cedars, the distant rush of the river, and the frantic, distorted crackle of my radio lying a few feet away. I lay there, gasping for air that finally felt real, my lungs burning with the scent of damp earth and rot. My hand was still clenched tight, my knuckles white and aching. I looked down and saw it. The red fire truck. It was there, but it was ruined. The plastic was melted and blackened, as if it had been held in a furnace. For Charlie! David! Answer me! Miller's voice on the radio was clear now. No more humming. No more whispers. I'm here, Chief. I rasped into the mic. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone much older. I'm in the clearing. The anomaly is gone. I looked toward the center of the clearing. The circle of perfectly mown grass was still there, but the white marble staircase had vanished. There was no trace of it, no rubble, no dust, no sign that a 12-step structure had ever existed. But in the exact spot where the first step had been, there was a rectangular patch of dead, scorched earth, where nothing, not even the moss, would grow. I never found Toby. The search was called off 2 days later. The official report said he likely fell into a crevice or was taken by a predator. I was put on mandatory leave for operational exhaustion. They said the things I saw were hallucinations caused by dehydration and the high altitude conditions. But they couldn't explain the red fire truck in my evidence bag, the toy that Toby's parents confirmed had been in his pocket when he disappeared. I left the service a month after that. I didn't say goodbye to Miller. I didn't want to see the look in his eyes, the look of a man who knew exactly what I'd seen and was terrified that I might ask him about the ones he'd found. I live in an apartment now, on the 14th floor of a concrete high-rise. There are no trees here, no moss, just glass, steel, and the steady, artificial hum of the city. But the stairs, they didn't stay in the woods. Every time I have to take the stairs in this building when the elevator is out or the power flickers, I feel it. I'll be on the 3rd landing or the 7th, and the air will suddenly grow thin. The scent of floor wax and ozone will drift through the stairwell, and the walls will seem to shimmer, turning into translucent white marble for a fraction of a second. I'll hear the giggling of a child from the floor above. Or worse, I'll hear my own voice echoing down from the roof. Just a few more, David. The view is better from here. I never go to the roof. I never look out the windows when the sky turns that specific shade of bruised violet at sunset, because I know that the staircase didn't need me to reach the top to be permanent. It just needed me to touch it. I'm part of the architecture now, a piece of the bridge that's still being built, one step at a time, in the dark corners of the world where people forget to look. I'm safe as long as I stay on the level ground. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I feel my right leg twitch, a phantom motion, as if it's still searching for the 8th step. And I know that one day, I'll stop fighting the gravity of the void. One day, the routine will break. And I'll find myself back in that clearing, looking up at a white marble path that leads to a city with too many moons. And when that day comes, I won't be a ranger anymore. I'll just be another echo in the whispering pines, waiting for the next man with a badge and a heavy heart to find the first step.